either. So either way, I think it's a big difference in the momentum than if you were, well, we're 4-4, but we lost 2 of those to teams that had 1 win combined and so on and so forth. So to me, important that the Browns go out there, obviously, and win every game, but this week, especially at home, it just changes the way you feel, I think, about the first half.
Right, and another thing it would make you 4-1 at home, and that's something you have to establish if we're ever going to become a good team, is to establish the home field advantage. And just to get in the habit of getting those wins at First Energy, 4-1, that would really look good. And again, to be halfway through the season and to have more wins than you had all last season, that's definitely some progress. That shows that, what you're doing is at least working to some extent, even if you're not definitely ready for the playoffs yet. But it just shows that, your talent level has risen and, you're moving in the right direction. And that's definitely, people talk about games that you're supposed to win. In the last several years, we've always been the team that the other team is definitely supposed to beat, even the bad teams. So ultimately, you've got to rise above that. And I think that if they can take care of business against the Buccaneers, there are no small games, and that would be a big win.
And you know what? Of course, I brought this up the other day as what I thought at least you would think on paper would give Tampa a huge advantage over the Browns here would be before you even get on the field, and that's in the coaching staff. Because as much as I like Mike Pettin and what he's done, and I really do, I like what he's about, and I can't wait to see, hopefully for the next few years, what he can turn this program into. But there's a difference between a new guy coming up and getting himself going and a guy like Lovie Smith, who I've always had a great amount of respect for. I said earlier in the week, I said, man, if it comes down to coaching, then I think that gives Tampa the advantage. So, but he's had a lot of trouble this year. There's a lot of people saying, well, has Lovie Smith lost his guide here? Has he lost his direction? He doesn't have this fastball anymore? They're having trouble. He doesn't have the right pieces for what he's trying to run. And I do agree to an extent that there are some outdated aspects of that defense that he tries to run, but I mean, it's a work in progress. He said as much this week. I know we're used to that phrase too here in Cleveland, but he goes, obviously we didn't think it'd be a 1-6 start to the season, but it's a work in progress. And yeah, they've got issues across the offensive line. I'm sure you're going to break into some of the individualities, but it's not even defensively a traditional what you'd expect out of Lovie Smith.
Right. I mean, statistically, you've got the team, basically the worst offense and the worst defense. So the Browns have to come into this thing. We've got to beat a team that has the worst offense and worst defense statistically. But you're right. I mean, talk about, Lovie Smith, he can't really make a great meal in the kitchen if he doesn't have half of his ingredients. And if you're just starting with the quarterback, I mean, they came into this year with Josh McCown as their starter, and he couldn't really get anything going those first 3 weeks. Of course, they really got completely hammered against the Falcons. Then they come in with Mike Glennon. And so you're really dealing with guys who've pretty much been kind of career backups, nobody who's going to really blow your doors off. Although Glennon has performed a lot better than McCown. McCown's rating was a 65, and Glennon's is an 85. So, and of course they beat the Steelers, but the fact that they've lost the last 3 games is not really too much Glennon's fault. I mean, he's not killing them out there throwing 4 interceptions. Really, their biggest problem, well, they've got a lot of problems, but offensively, the biggest problem is the running game has been virtually non-existent.
Listening to the Sports Fix, you are Jeff Gorman from Browns101.com joining me here as we're looking into the Tampa Bay Bucs and the Browns here this week. And let's start looking at Tampa Bay. Of course, a few changes to them this week. They made a trade. They did trade out their starting safety here, which I think leads some openings defensively just because of miscommunication. I think if I'm the Browns, I'm well aware of the fact that there's some changes defensively here, and I may try to exploit that early on. But I mean, obviously you bring it up with the Tampa and where they rank across the board defensively. It's near the bottom of the league and all of that. Browns have to continue to just pound the ball. Win, it doesn't matter. Win ugly, it doesn't matter how you do it, but they have to get out there and pound the ball.
That's right, and it's a good thing that you mentioned about winning ugly. A lot of people were really not all that happy with their win over the Raiders last week. They didn't look very impressive. They couldn't run the ball. But as you always have to be happy that you have a win, and it is actually a sign of a good team when you can win when you don't have everything going your way. Just like a pitcher who doesn't have his best stuff, but somehow manages to grit his way to a win. And if you see how the Browns did it last week, they made the big plays in the fourth quarter to put themselves over. And that's, what I said was going to happen. I said that the Raiders, even if they stuck around, the Browns were going to be the team that made the big plays at the end to win that game. And they did. And I think that's what they have to do here, although hopefully it won't be that close, because the Bucs have shown the propensity to be blown out pretty badly. In fact, they really have a hard time even getting anything going in the first half. Like, they've been shut out in the first half in the last two games, and that's definitely a trend that the Browns need to start to continue. Because if they can put the Bucs in a 14-17-0 hole at halftime, I just don't think the Bucs have the firepower to come back.
Well, especially with the crowd, you get them rocking. I'm with you. You need to get some things going early, get the tension out of the air, and just get things rolling downhill for there. Of course, we talk about doing it with the running game, which I still say it's going to be 2 or 3 more weeks at least before the Browns are in what I would say would be the optimum mode for the rest of the season. I don't mean it's the best that they can. It's the best that they can do with what they've got. It'll be what it's going to be for the second half of the season. I think you got 2 or 3 more weeks there, but obviously up front, I don't think anywhere near as good as what you had with Jacksonville, but obviously you've got Gerald McCoy. You've got 3 sacks on the season, who's also got 4 tackles for loss. He's got a couple of pass deflections. Now, that's one place that I point out here that I'm concerned about defensively, not just getting to Brian Hoyer, but Tampa Bay, I don't know if you noticed, but they are up near the top of the league as well. 29 pass deflections across the line. They do a good job of Werner has 5. They've got several other guys, McCoy. Guys get their hands up and bat passes down, and we've seen that start to be an issue with the Browns the last couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that as well. This is a defense that's good at getting their hands up and batting passes down.
That's a good point. That's something to watch out for. But the other person, I think, the main guy I think you have to watch out on the defense of the Bucs is Levante David. He has really been coming on strong. In fact, he's had 14 tackles in each of his last 3 games. So he's at a really high level, being very, very consistent, really being the engine to keep this the Buccaneers defense going, such as it is. But the Browns are going to pretty much have to, take a few shots down the field, even in the absence of Cameron, and they're going to have to try to exploit the holes in the cover 2 defense, which a lot of other teams have been able to do. It's just going to be a matter of, just finding those openings and looking for guys like Miles Austin and guys like Andrew Hawkins and even perhaps Jim Dre or Taylor Gabriel to have a really good game out of the backfield. But I think ultimately it starts with running the ball. I know it's been depressing to have them only carry the ball like 2 yards a game the last 2 games, but they can't give up on it. They have to keep grinding away, because even if you only get 2 or 3 yards, you've still got the clock in your favor. You're still, getting some kind of positive momentum, and you're keeping from the other team just selling out on the pass, which happened so much last year. Everybody knew that the Browns were going to pass 50-some times a game, and that's just not a recipe for success.
Absolutely. You mentioned Dre in there. Him and Barnage both, I expect them each to play a role. And when I say that, I don't mean 10 catches for 200 yards, but I think they each have an important catch or 2 in this game. They're going to fill in that role. It seems like every time Hoyer and Cameron start to get some chemistry between them and look like they're really going to be one of those effective combinations, one or the other goes down. Last year it was Hoyer. Here it's been Cameron, who's been unable to get healthy. Clearly he likes to get the ball to him. Last week it seemed like they were. So, but I liked in preseason and training camp, I told you guys, I love Gary Barnage as a back. I think he does a great job filling in as well. And Jim Dre. Talked to some people when the Browns signed him. There were guys that posted on Facebook, who cares? This guy won't even make the team out of training camp. He's just a camp body or whatever. And I'm like, you're nuts. Why? Because you've never heard of the name? So many people judge things off of the name. It's like it's something I've learned about so many sports fans. It drives me. They'll be like, who's that? I've never heard of the guy. Like, well, just because you've never heard of the guy doesn't mean anything, But so many people will be like, yeah, so-and-so should win this easily because I never heard of that guy, or how does this undrafted guy will never make the team? Dude, a third of the league is undrafted guys nowadays. But anyways, Jim Dre is a guy that I said, man, I've heard good things as far as what he's going to do in the blocking and in the passing game, and I think we've seen a little bit. Like I said, you're not looking for big monster stuff, but both of those guys are capable fill-ins, and that's going to be important because being down Cameron, you're going to be down Cameron probably this week and Cincinnati as well because of the short week there. So that's big. You got to get some replacements there, and it's next man up, as they say. But like we say about Alex Mack, there's a difference between replacing certain guys. Jordan Cameron, one of those guys that's not as easy to replace. And offensively, all of that's going to play a part in what they're doing. Switch over to the other side, though. Let's look at the Browns defensively against that Tampa offense. You started to talk about it earlier with Mike Glennon there at quarterback, what he's done here this season. He's got 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in his starts this season. He's been sacked 14 times. Overall, that offensive line, a big weakness over there for Tampa. Not only are they a bad running team, they're averaging, I believe, 85 yards a game on the ground, but they've given up 19 sacks so far this season. So I expect Paul Kruger, once again, to be a part of the game plan, dialing up those blitzes and getting after the quarterback and trying to put that pressure, because this offensive line has shown that it cannot handle a good pressure consistent throughout the game.
Right, that's going to be key because Glenn, and you mentioned he's been sacked 14 times. That's not all season. He's only been in 4 games, so he didn't play those first 3 games. So they've been able to get to him, and that's going to be the key, is to make it so he can't get comfortable back there, because he does have some pretty decent weapons. If you look at the Bucs, you say, well, do they have any strengths at all? I would say that their receivers are pretty good. Of course, we all know what Vincent Jackson can do, but they went out and they really shored that up. Their first 2 draft picks were Mike Evans, the wideout out of Texas A&M, and then they got Austin Seferian-Jenkins at tight end, and they both of those guys have done pretty well. So, with those people together, along with Lewis Murphy's had a couple of big catches for them too. So he's got a decent amount of guys to throw to. It's just going to be a matter of the Browns, like you said, dialing up some blitzes and putting some pressure on him, because that really worked very well last week, and just really make it so he's not comfortable back there, so that guys like Tashawn Gibson and Dante Whitner can make some big plays and some big hits. And but the thing is, like I said, the running game is really not doing very well at all. Doug Martin's supposed to be their main guy, and he really has not been able to have a good year at all. He's only carrying for just less than 3 yards a game. Actually, Bobby Rainey, who was one of our cast-offs, is their best running back right now. But even in their win against the Steelers, they didn't really run the ball very well. In fact, I was looking at that game, I'm like, okay, what do we have to watch out for? When everything goes right for the Buccaneers and they win a game, what happens? And the answer in that case was the Steelers just gave that game away. I mean, they committed a ton of penalties. They didn't execute, down the stretch. So the best thing the Browns can do is just to hang on to the ball and, just play a smart football game and just not give the game to the Bucs. If the Browns play reasonably well and just hang on to the ball, even if they don't do anything flashy or spectacular, they should definitely win this game.
And you brought up those receivers in there. I didn't want to cut you off, but yeah, that's the one place where I do look for Tampa to try to exploit the advantage that they have, and that is with those wide receivers, with those taller receivers. And as you mentioned, Jackson, who I thought maybe would be traded this week, Evans, who's somebody that I wouldn't have minded being in brown and orange as well. They've got some tall guys. Yeah. Both of those guys are 6'5" and some change, and that's going to cause some matchup issues as well. Browns defensive backs are going to have to bring their A game. It's going to be all about technique with those tall guys, because to me, the likelihood for pitter-pat with your hands is more often because you've got a more physical matchup, because you're trying to counter the size advantage, and that's going to lead to a lot of ticky-tack pass interference calls. The Browns are really going to have to buckle down and high point the ball and bat passes away. They're going to really have to use their technique or be exposed for lack of technique, because otherwise I can see a scenario where come Monday, regardless of what happens in the game, we're talking about a big amount of those pass interference, defensive holding penalties, because there's going to be a lot of physical contact otherwise. Because if you don't out-technique them, then your only choice is to try to out-physical them, and then you're going to get flagged all day long in this NFL.
Right. I think you're definitely right. I think that's going to be the biggest test for the defense is the secondary, because I like our chances of getting some pressure on Glennon, and I really am not too worried about the Bucs running all over us, despite the